I want to start with Guy Ryder, who's the Director-General of the International Labour Organization. Now, Guy, there's some who would argue that the problem with trade, of course, is that it is not inclusive, it's not equitable, it doesn't create the jobs and opportunities that are so desperately needed in so many places in the world. So many people seem to be locked out of the system. What do we need to do?
Well, thanks, Julie. Thanks very much for this opportunity. You know, I think watching that video, a very powerful video, and listening to the messages that we've heard this morning, I think we all need to keep in our minds the fact that behind these products, behind these services, increasingly traded internationally, there are women and men who actually produce the products, who provide the services. Now, to answer your question, I think it's indisputable. Everything that we know, all the research that's been done, our everyday experience shows that, you know, increasingly in open trade, increased trading opportunities, its aggregate effect is to increase employment and job opportunities. This we know. But I think it's a mistake to simply leave it at the stage of saying trade liberalization is good for jobs, press on. The fact of the matter is, and this is what your question leads us towards, the benefit of increased trade are unequally distributed. There are winners, but there are also some losers. And I don't think it will serve our cause of promoting trade, as the Secretary-General has said, as a driver of sustainable and equitable development, if we leave aside that reality. So here's my point. Trade liberalization, continuing opening of trade opportunities is vital, but needs to be accompanied by other policy interventions, which means that the benefits of trade can be maximized and distributed equitably, which I think is what the sustainability of trade relies upon as well. Now, when you have more open trading systems, inevitably you have increased competitive pressures in our individual economies. That means jobs change. There's a churning of creation and destruction of jobs. I think it's our responsibility and part of the job of the international system as a whole to help to prepare countries to respond to the opportunities that arise. One area we're working on, I mentioned it, but there are many others, is on training, on skills development, enabling countries to take the benefits that arise from increased trade opportunities. It's one thing the ILO and the WTO is working together on, and I hope we can do more. People worry as well, of course, about the quality of work that arises from trade and the changes in trade. There's an extremely complicated debate to be had. Let me just illustrate the point I want to make with one example. I'll be very quick. Bangladesh. You know, the Rana Plaza tragedy, which we've all thought so much about and tried to respond to so actively, really brought out a reality and the issue we have to tackle in terms of the quality of jobs. We know that this fantastically dynamic garment industry of Bangladesh has provided 3.5 million jobs, mostly for young women who would have had few other employment opportunities. We know that this has been instrumental in bringing down poverty in Bangladesh pretty spectacularly. And yet it has meant people going to work in dangerous and potentially lethal conditions. Two conclusions from that. One, and I say it only in parenthesis, we have to look at how supply chains operate in our global economy. It's a bigger and bigger part of what we're talking about. My own organization is trying to tackle that question. But secondly, and it goes back to what I said at the outset, we have to accompany trade liberalization with other complementary policies that enable the benefits to be extracted. Lastly, with an anecdote, it was 100 years ago, actually this year, that Henry Ford decided he'd pay a minimum wage to his workers in Detroit of $5 a day. He was pretty smart. He wanted to keep skilled workers, but he understood as well that if you don't have people with money in their pocket, the company won't work, and by the way, the trading system won't work. One of the reasons, and I hope, Roberto, I'm using the appropriate language, why we're all worried about the weak nature of trade growth, the anemic nature of growth of trade in the global economy is demand and consumption is so weak. Many lessons to be learned from that reality, but the one that I want to conclude on is that it makes no sense and is dangerous for any country to think that the right way forward in extracting increased advantages from trade, greater competitiveness, is simply to drive down labour costs. Individually, it's bad. Collectively, it leads us in the wrong direction.